Hello everyone. I am Vijaya Chitikana. On behalf of TCS Ion Direct Academy channel, I welcome you all to the webinar on the topic Digital Marketing Strategies for MSMEs. Let's take an overview of the topic. Businesses do not run in thin air. It requires lot of proper planning and strategy by business experts. The MSMEs, which stands for micro, small, medium enterprises, plays a crucial role in the growing economy. In today's era, it is important for everybody to have a strong digital presence owing to the fact that our social and real lives are intricately connected. This digital world is a huge platform where it has done a lot of wonders in the past few years and is now witnessing innovation in the digital marketing space, especially to accelerate the business growth. All the businesses, whichever industry they cater to, have a primary goal of increasing their sales and maximizing their return on investment. And to achieve this business critical objective of maximizing return on investment, digital marketing undoubtedly can do the magic. So to understand more about the digital marketing for MSMEs, we have a special guest today. It's my pleasure and an honor to welcome and introduce our guest speaker today, Associate Professor Subin Sudhir from Indian Institute of Management, Indore. Professor Subin Sudhir is an Associate Professor and Chair, Executive Education Programs at IIM Indore. Earlier, he was an Associate Professor at IIM Tiruchirappalli. He was a consultant, Research and Insights at ICRM Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Also, he served as a Technology Marketing Manager at Tata Elxsi Limited and Systems Engineer at Wipro Technologies. He did his MBA in Marketing from the University of Kerala and Fellow Programming Management from IIM Kozhikode. Once again, I welcome you, Professor Subin Sudhir.
Thank you, Vijaya.
So, sir, moving ahead, we all know that digital marketing has evolved to such an extent that there is no limitations to number of approaches we use. So how can MSME identify different digital channels to reach out to the customers across industries? Over to you.
Right. Thank you, Vijaya. Thank you, TCS Digital Academy, for having me today. So MSMEs have been very close to my heart. I've been interacting with a lot of MSMEs over the years, and I'm very glad to interact with this audience on this very important topic of digital marketing. Even from the point of view of the current government, if you look at the Ministry of MSMEs, you find that there is a lot of emphasis on digital marketing for MSMEs, and there is a lot of training and a lot of support provided to MSMEs to ensure that they have a digital presence. Now, before I come into the specific question that you asked me, how organizations can choose digital channels, let me give a brief overview of what digital marketing means. There is this misconception, and many times we all follow this misconception that digital marketing is to do only with social media and the search engines and all of that, which is not very true. Because if you look at marketing in general, marketing talks about 4 key activities that companies have to do. And this is not just with MSMEs, with all organizations out there. This includes creation of what is valuable to the consumer. Then it includes communication of whatever you have as valuable offerings to consumers. Then to make sure that you can deliver this value to consumers. And finally, there are some marketplace exchanges that take place, and to ensure that these exchanges can also be enabled. All of this is under marketing. So when it comes to digital, which is essentially about how the internet and the revolution around the internet has made a huge change in the marketplace and how companies and consumers engage in this marketplace, there have been changes across all of these areas. So for example, today you find new business models emerging. There are companies which have created value purely in the internet domain. For example, a few decades ago probably, a platform like Netflix would not have existed. A platform like Uber might not have existed. A platform like Etsy or a platform like Airbnb might not have existed. Of course, there are contemporaries of all of these companies in the Indian context as well, may it be an Ola or a hotel business, etc., etc. So all of these have been ways by which new business models have evolved in the digital space, where the entire product offering or the services that are offered are purely digital. That has been a huge change in how the digital ecosystem has evolved. And this gives a lot of opportunity for MSMEs as well. Because today you can have MSMEs not just focus on the traditional manufacturing or service domains that we focus on or we focused on earlier. Today, MSMEs can also start venturing into purely digital and purely internet-based service offerings or value creation as activities for consumers and the society at large. Secondly, with regard to communication, there has been a huge change that has happened. Like all of us understand, we are all part of this digital ecosystem today. You have search engines, you have social media, you have mobile apps, you have the entire ecosystem of, computers or tablets or mobile phones, etc. All of these aspects are used effectively by marketers to reach out to consumers, which I'll touch upon in a bit. Then there has been change in the way you are delivering offerings to consumers, irrespective of whether you are in the B2B domain or the B2C domain. B2B in the sense where you're interacting with other organizations, other businesses who might be procuring goods and services from you, so that value can be further added and sold away to end consumers or to other businesses, maybe in the form of manufacturing or maybe in the form of packaging or chemicals, etc., where a lot of MSME participants are from. You find that in both of these domains, e-commerce today plays a huge role. Of course, there are different platforms that exist. For example, in a B2C domain, Amazon and Walmart, Flipkart, etc., are huge platforms which help in B2C marketplaces or B2C exchanges today. Again, C2C exchanges through platforms like, for example, OLX, etc., also exist. But of course, MSMEs might not have a lot of role to do in that particular domain. But at least in the B2C domain, there are a lot of opportunities with regard to e-commerce. In the B2B domain as well, IndiaMart and such platforms exist, where you can do a lot of business with other business entities, and the entire B2B ecosystem is also ready in the country. And finally, when it comes to exchanging, there are exchanges that take place. One of these exchanges is, of course, the monetary exchange, which all of us understand has completely gone into the digital domain. Apart from which, there are mobile wallets today, which enable you to do transactions easily with your consumers. And also another exchange that commonly takes place in the marketplace, which a lot of MSMEs are unfortunately losing out, is with regard to customer relationships. So how do you ensure that you have a lasting relationship with your consumers? In the traditional domain, it was more manual in nature. It used to have happen due to human intervention, where people used to be in touch with their clients and members in the client organization. But today you have software, you have a lot of technologies, you have CRM and loyalty programs, which definitely enable you to have exchanges done effectively. So across all of these domains, there have been a lot of changes that have taken place. There have been huge and drastic improvements with regard to how MSMEs can utilize the digital domain to reach out to consumers. Now, coming specifically to the question that you asked me, how can MSMEs actually decide which channel to choose? So here we have to understand a few principles or key concepts that are important when it comes to choice of channel or marketing strategy in general. And let me give you 4 simple things that we can remember. We can all remember. The first factor is that consumers are different. All consumers are different. No two consumers are alike. Depending on how much of a complexity you want to decide, you will find that all consumers are different in their preferences, in their attitudes, in their behavior, in the way in which they make decisions. They're all going to be different. Sorry. So when consumers are different, you need to manage consumer heterogeneity. And in order to manage consumer heterogeneity, you need to identify one group of consumers or one cohort of consumers who might be the best suited for the kind of product or service that you're offering. Even if you are a B2B company, you need to identify the kind of industry to whom your products or your services can add value. So that is where the first key principle, that means which consumers are different, is dealt with. The second key principle says that all consumers, although they are different, they also change over time. No consumer is going to be the same when they are acquired in today's time versus when they are being served maybe a few years down the line or a few months down the line. So because consumers change, you need to focus on consumer dynamics. So this is where you need to understand what are the evolving needs of consumers, how are these consumer preferences changing, how are the kinds of marketers, apart from yours, who are your competitors, addressing these consumers and reaching out to these consumers, etc., etc. So you need to manage consumer dynamics. The third important factor is that competitors will react, and all competitors will react to an extent which they can. Right, some of them will react in very fierce and aggressive manner. Some of them will be more subtle in their reactions, but all competitors will react. And when competitors react, every firm needs to have certain sustainable competitive advantages which they can get back on and rely on to succeed in the marketplace. So generally, every organization, may it be a big for-profit organization or an MSME, has to focus on creating these sustainable competitive advantages. And generally, there are three levels at which the competitive advantages can be created. It is either by creating a brand, or by having offerings which nobody else in the market has, or by ensuring that you have very strong relationships and thereby very strong loyalty and patronage from your consumers. So you need to have these sustainable competitive advantages. And the last of the four principles is the fact that all companies have limited resources. So when you have limited resources, you have to make sure that these resources are utilized in a very effective manner so that you can make the maximum out of the amount of money that you're investing, or with regard to the number of people who you are dedicating to the digital activity and things like that. So again, to summarize the four key principles that I just mentioned, the first one is that all consumers are different. The second is that all consumers change. The third is that you need to have sustainable competitive advantages because your competitors are going to react. And the fourth is basically the fact that you have limited resources. Now, how do you choose which of the platforms do you want to be on? Any MSME, any company has a certain segment of customers that they cater to. This is again going back to the first principle. So the platform that you choose should be the platform where majority of your key customers are in. Majority of your potential customers should be on such a platform. So may it be social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, etc., or may it be digital platforms like, say, search engines and Amazon and Flipkart, etc. You need to choose platforms which judiciously are able to justify that the fact that your customer group or the segment that you're trying to target is present on that platform. That becomes the first question. The second element that you want to look for is the fact that customers change. So when customers change and the segment that you have chosen, if these customers have a need to change, are you able to, one, capture the changing preferences of these customers, and does the platform enable you and help you to adapt to those changing preferences? That needs to be the second question that needs to be answered. And thirdly, try to see if you can build those sustainable competitive advantages on the platform that you choose. Many a times, what a lot of companies, specifically smaller organizations who are MSMEs, try to do is they try to get into the clutter of social media or digital marketing. When I say clutter, there are a lot of platforms where a lot of big players are present. The number of players who are trying to address the customer on this one short platform are enormous. And because there are so many number of players, it becomes very difficult for you to create a unique place. Many a times, the consumer doesn't even recognize that you are trying to communicate to them. So avoid such platforms and choose platforms where you get the visibility, you get the opportunity to talk to the consumer. You might not have the scale initially, wherein you might not be reaching out to millions of customers in one go, but you might have a way by which you can talk to the few people in a very effective manner. And finally, because you have constraints of money and human resources and other abilities, try to choose platforms which can actually do justice to your objectives. So some firms might have an objective of acquiring customers. So if your objective is to acquire customers, look at the platforms that the customers are going to go in order to make those decisions. Which are the ways by which consumers are now trying to evaluate which product to buy, which service to buy, or which other partner to have in the value chain, and thereby decide which platform to be on. So these might be some of the directions that MSMEs would want to think about whether while deciding whether to choose a platform or another.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor. It was an insightful one. Apart from identifying the right digital channel, they of course have to leverage on their major potential candidates, and they have to utilize their limited resources as well.
Right.
Professor, so when we are coming to the traditional marketing aspects, we all know that traditional marketing is there with us from a very long period of time. And on another hand, we have digital marketing, which is becoming popular from the past few years. So how can MSMEs integrate its traditional marketing activities with digital marketing activities? So please throw some of the impact of social media as well.
Right. So basically, I believe you're again going back to the communication standpoint. So let me address this question based on communication per se. So the traditional model of communicating to consumers was predominantly using a lot of advertising, or by using sales promotions or trade promotions, or by having salespeople who are going to talk to customers and consumers, and thereby explaining to them what is the right product and what is the value in the product, and maybe also negotiating over the price and things like that. What has happened today is that you have consumers who have now gone into a digital domain. And again, we have to remember that even if we talk about an MSME who is in the B2B domain, it is not the organization that makes decisions, but it is the people in your client organization who are going to make those decisions. So human intervention in decision making, especially when it comes to marketing and sales related decisions, can never be eliminated. So there is always an element of perception, there is always an element of relationship, there is always an element of making people convinced that your product or service is best suited for them, and the value that you offer is better off than anybody else in the marketplace, right? Now, considering this fact, the communication, may it be traditional or digital, doesn't really change a lot. You basically, when you're talking about marketing communications, you're trying to achieve one of the three key objectives. The first objective is to build awareness. Awareness in the sense, letting the potential customer know that you have the capability and you have the offerings which might be required by the customer. So that is the first of the objectives of why communication is done, building awareness. The second objective of communication most of the times is to persuade customers to buy something. Now, persuasion is to push the customer a little closer to making that decision that this product or this service needs to be bought at this point of time. Or in a B2B scenario, it is to get the client to decide that this is the vendor that I require over all the other vendors who might be offering that service. So that is persuasive communication. And the third element is reminding the customer. Now, reminding the customer is because the customer knows you exist in the market. The customer knows that you have the capabilities that you claim to have. The customer knows that you have these value delivering activities that you're doing, but then over time the customer might forget. So hence you want to remind the customer that you are still having all of these offerings, and probably also adding to the mix of products and services that you're offering. So in these three objectives, traditional marketing and digital marketing can be now thought about to be in a transformative approach, wherein you have awareness building campaigns that used to happen earlier on, say, television. Today they have moved into another format of advertising, which is in social media platforms and in the digital world. For example, traditionally you would have seen advertisements coming up on television channels where you will say that XYZ company is selling this product. Now today you will find that the advertisement has moved into a YouTube channel, where you go to YouTube and you will find the advertisement of a company which is selling the same product, XYZ, is now advertising on YouTube. Or when you go to Facebook, you will find that the advertisement is now shown to you as a sponsored piece of content alongside the content that you see from your friends and other people on your social network. So this entire ecosystem that existed in the traditional format is still possible on the digital format through advertising. So hence, it is possible for you to easily switch from traditional to digital in this form. Now, then again, there are more things that can be done in the digital format. For example, traditionally, there were two formats of communication in the customer's mind. One was communication that was done by the marketer. In this case, an MSME would now talk to the consumer either through a sales channel or through an advertising channel or by printed material, etc., and tell the consumer that this is the offering that I have and this is the value that I'm offering. But in the digital domain, you have, of course, the opportunity to talk directly to the consumer, but at the same time, you have the opportunity to get a satisfied customer to talk to a potential customer. For example, let's say, Vijaya, you had consumed a particular product. Let's say you had a packet of chips. You can now write a review about that packet of chips so that a potential consumer who might be thinking about buying that chip can look at your experience and say that, oh, now I am much more convinced because Vijaya seems to be a person like me and Vijaya found it tasty. So I might also find it tasty and healthy. So reviews and recommendations can also be used effectively on digital platforms. And that is the charm of social media, wherein you can get existing customers, irrespective of the scale of the organization. You can get existing customers to come to the social media platform and write about the products and services that you're offering. Let me tell you the example of one of my good friends. He was a classmate of mine in college, but later on decided to leave the corporate job and pursue photography. Right. And when he started photography, he wanted to have some kind of a presence on social media platforms. So he chose to be on Facebook first, later on decided to go to Instagram. So on Facebook, when he started off, he created a page for himself. And we see thousands of great photographers on Facebook who will have these photography pages. Now, he started getting a lot of customers to come onto the platform and start endorsing him. Every time he does a photo shoot, maybe it's a pre-wedding shoot or a wedding photography or candid photography, or he's doing for a brand, like for a product launch or things like that, he started updating his page with a lot of these profiles, a lot of this information, and also started getting a lot of engagement with existing customers. So every time he started doing it, it didn't have the scale. For example, when Byju's goes on Star Plus and puts up an advertisement, Byju's is able to reach crores and crores of people in, say, 10 seconds that the ad is running. But in social media, with regard to word of mouth, recommendations and reviews, you might not get that scale immediately. But every time one customer comes to your platform and writes a review or engages with a piece of content that you've put in there, it basically amplifies the message. When I say amplification, it now goes to the 1,000 people or a few hundred people that this individual customer is connected to. And then thereby, 10 customers can take it to 10,000 people, 5,000 people, I don't know how many. So if done very effectively in a systematic manner, you can get a lot of word of mouth recommendations to come on social media platforms, which can kind of enable you to have a complete social media and digital presence. And you can eliminate a lot of the traditional campaigns that you were doing earlier. But again, we have to remember that at the end of the day, the customer is looking at a business entity. The customer is looking at an organization, an MSME, who basically might have certain products and services that they're offering, or might have some services which can be offered to a B2B company. Either of these cases, the customer should not get confused with what is being spoken to the customer in the traditional domain and in the digital domain. There should be a unison between how the customer sees you when they're looking at you in the traditional domain and when they're looking at you in the digital domain. So the firm should identify what are the core activities that we need to talk about. What is the brand principle that we want to showcase in front of the customer? What kind of brand mantra do we need to have? And what is that unique selling proposition that should be consistent across all of these platforms? And then you start working upon what are the objectives, and based on that objective, what kind of platforms and what kind of campaigns do I need to do? And once somebody puts in their mind, any MSME puts in their mind to decide all of these factors in a systematic manner, you will definitely have a very effective campaign, irrespective of whether you use a website or a mobile app or a social media platform or a search engine or any of these in unison.
Oh, well, that's an interesting fact, and the thorough analysis of Professor, because often we struck between the traditional marketing and the digital marketing, and MSMEs definitely require this much analysis to go into the market to fetch the long-term results, not but the short-term itself. And when we speak about Professor, about the long-term objective, of course every company is having eyes on return on investment, right? So how return on investment can be assessed on different digital marketing channels?
Okay, good question. A question that is very frequently asked by a lot of entrepreneurs and MSMEs. We have very limited resources. If I put this money into, say, Facebook advertising or YouTube advertising, how do I really know whether it is going to fetch me any returns? So now we have to understand that the two key principles based on which digital and social media is becoming an enabler to all organizations is one, that it builds on great effectiveness, and secondly, it leads to greater efficiency. When I say effectiveness, it basically gets you to do a lot more business than you were traditionally able to do. And when I say effectiveness, it basically helps you. When I say efficiency, it basically helps you do things with lesser number of people and lesser resources that you were doing earlier. So both of these things can be measured. But again, let me remind you that it might not be possible to measure both of these aspects in very easy and simple simple methods. So that is why some attention is required even in how you want to calculate what your ROI metric is going to look like. So what we generally tell a lot of digital marketers is that ROI and ROI measurement often starts from the key objective of why you wanted to spend that money. For example, if I go back and talk about how consumers need to be convinced to buy the product, you can look at three core activities that digital marketers do or social media marketers do. One is where social media marketers enhance the reach of their brand message or their marketing message to large number of customers, with an assumption that once customers are aware of a product or a service being available in the market, some of these customers might be interested to come and buy the product. So you are trying to increase the number of people who are aware of your offering so that at least a small percentage of them will come and buy the product. So these are awareness building campaigns or campaigns which basically are focused on enhancing the reach. The second set of campaigns basically want customers to give you information or customers to tell you how is that your company is doing or what can be done better, or for customers to now engage with you in some manner so that the network effects, like I told earlier, where somebody liking on my content will now take it to 10 other people, those network effects can reach more people, right? So that is where the second objective might be engagement. And engagement can also be termed in the sense of getting people to come onto your e-commerce platform or come onto your website or give their information so that you have their mobile numbers or WhatsApp numbers to then call up them or talk to them and sell the product or services to them. So that is engagement building. And thirdly is the actual conversion metric that exists. So when I say conversion metrics, you basically are looking at how many people did you sell your product to and how much revenue did you generate from the amount of products that you sold, right? So all of these three things can be objectives of any digital marketer. For example, let's say that we are talking about an MSME who basically is in the tourism sector. You're talking about somebody who might be running a small hotel in some part of the country. There could be multiple reasons why they can get into social media. For example, let's say that you're going into YouTube and you're running an advertising campaign for people who are looking at video bloggers who are now developing content around the geography where your hotel is, or you're looking at people who are looking for travel destinations or looking for tourism related stuff, etc. You're running an advertising campaign. So you know effectively how much money you have spent because you have budgets and you have spending details so that you know how much money you have spent. Now, what is required is the numerator. How much did you get in return, right? One way of assessing the return could be the total number of people that you have reached. So for example, if you were able to reach say 1 lakh people, you can then assess out of the 1 lakh people that you have reached, how many people did you get to come and stay in your hotel? How can this be done? Many a times this would require you to gather information when people come to your hotel and check into your hotel, or else you might want to have an e-commerce platform, maybe a simple website where you want to see what traffic are you getting from YouTube based on those advertisements. If you see that I am getting X percentage traffic coming from that particular YouTube campaign, you know what is the traffic that this campaign has now generated. And because most companies and most entrepreneurs out there would know what is the conversion rate from traffic to guests in your hotel, you might be able to assess what is the revenue that you generated from that particular advertisement that you had put up on YouTube, right? For example, I'm trying to oversimplify things because it is easy to understand. If you run 10 such campaigns, for example, on YouTube, Facebook, X, Y, Z, etc., it becomes complicated because now you have to assess each of them separately, and also there might be overlaps which need to be eliminated. So that requires some bit of assistance from maybe somebody who knows how to run analytics, or maybe you want to engage some kind of tool to help you do this. Many a times, whenever you get into the advertising domain, you will have the platform itself enabling you with such tools. For example, if you go into the Google ad ecosystem, the Google ad ecosystem will give you traffic detail, will even give you attribution details and conversion details, etc. Right. I'll again tell the audience that in case some of these terms are not very clear, please ask us questions so that we can help you understand better. The second is when you run a campaign, but it is not advertising related. For example, you put up content on social media, which you have created. You didn't pay money for any kind of any kind of promotion of that content. You just put it up on social media, and organically you are getting people to now like on it, comment on it, share on it, etc., etc., etc. Right. So now the cost is very limited. You don't have any money that you have spent. Basically, the cost is going to be just hiring a photographer to take a good video and putting that video up there. So it might be a 10, 20, 30,000 rupees for a small video about your hotel and what kind of content it is. Now there can be a reach that you get from this content. The reach basically is how many people that this content reach to organically without spending advertising money. Now this can be converted into monetary terms based on how much money would you have had to spend in order to get to so many people by advertising. For example, if you put up a video about your hotel and the scenery around the hotel, the activities in the hotel, the swimming pool and this and that and all of that, and it now was able to be seen by 1 lakh people. You didn't spend any money to get it to 1 lakh people. Organically, it went to 1 lakh people because of your prior guests sharing it. Now, instead of this, if you had used advertising, how many rupees would you have had to spend in order to get it to 1 lakh people? So that can be known to you because most platforms will give you that information. So once you know that for a video to reach 1 lakh people, you had to spend, say, 25,000 rupees. The campaign's returns is in a very simple level, 25,000 rupees, which you have saved in advertising expenses. So that saving can be assessed as a return that you have generated. Alongside, you can look at all the other revenue parameters of how many people did you gain from such campaigns and things like that. So depending on whether you're running an advertising campaign or whether you're doing something in an organic word of mouth platform, you might have different ways of assessing return on investment. It is a little bit of a complex process, but with the understanding that most entrepreneurs in the audience today have as to what is the return that I'm getting from every bit of investment that I'm making, maybe in human resource or capital or other investments, this also, if thought about properly, you might be able to understand what is a right metric to use for understanding the return on investment.
That's absolutely true, Professor. So, coming to the organic searches, maybe the MSMEs have to leverage on that aspect. And then, as you have mentioned, we can cater to different segments based on their advertisement campaigns, pricings and all. But moving ahead, Professor, from your wide experience, can you please tell us how can MSMEs anticipate competitor response across different, digital marketing activities on multiple channels, including the new technologies as well?
Right. So again, it is very industry specific. When we say competitor response, it is very industry specific. So somebody in the chemical industry, a competitor might respond very differently from somebody who is in a manufacturing industry or somebody who is in tourism or somebody who is in electronics, etc. There might be different responses that you find. So in general, one principle that we can all keep in mind is that competitors will definitely react. So when competitors react, they have to be within the space of capabilities that they currently have or the potential capabilities that they can acquire. So that is where we might want to have market intelligence help us understand what kind of changes are they proposing to do. Right. Two ways in which this can be looked at. One is where we cannot be myopic in our view. When I say myopic in our view, we basically have a tendency, and this tendency is very much so more prevalent when it comes to MSMEs as compared to other big firms, because bigger firms have dedicated departments to take care of this challenge. But for MSMEs, because many of them might have smaller teams, might be entrepreneur or leader driven, you might have challenges wherein you become myopic with regard to the resource challenges that you're facing, with the customer orders that you have to deal with immediately, or with the superiority of product in that particular segment at that point of time, etc. You became complacent to the fact that competitors would react. Now, in order to circumvent this aspect, one has to be ready and one has to be prepared. So the only good thing that entrepreneurs in the MSME domain can start focusing on is to be aware of what changes are happening in the internet and the digital domain with regard to Industry 4.0. Understand what are the things that might have an impact even in a very far-fetched manner. For example, if you are in the packaging industry, let's say, for example, if you are in the packaging industry, we are seeing that most of the packaging today is in the format of plastic material or glass or cardboard based, etc., etc., etc. There could be a quick change in this entire industry if there is some kind of biomaterial that comes in the picture, right? And in order to assess what kind of competitor response could happen, entrepreneurs and production teams should always be in the lookout for what is happening in the research and development with regard to biomaterial, bioplastics, environmentally friendly packaging material, etc. At the same time, you might also want to see what is happening with regard to the clients of yours, FMCG companies, pharma companies, etc., who might have socially and environmentally sustainable goals for which they might be thinking about evolving their packaging. For example, a shampoo manufacturing company, because they generally have shampoos put into plastic bottles, might be aggressively thinking about how can I eliminate the single-use plastic where shampoo is being packaged and sold to customers, right? So there might be a lot of things that PNG, ITC, HUL, etc. are doing with regard to research and development in this domain. They might be acquiring a lot of firms. They might be talking in different forums where such kind of packaging changes are happening, etc. And some of your competitors might end up having that capability before you. The only way you can eliminate this happening is by constantly updating information with regard to what changes can happen in the industry with regard to the core offering that you are making. And one way by which you can do it is by making sure that you are accessible and you have access to all kinds of information, at least in the digital domain, with regard to industry practices, R&D that is happening, and what these customers or potential customers of yours are doing with regard to the core value that you're offering. So that is where we need to be having some kind of mechanism in place where we can understand what is to be done. The second is, of course, being able to listen to what your customers' problems are. Many a times, customers are very vocal. They might be talking about the problems. They might be talking about the challenges that they face. They might be trying to reach out to you and trying to communicate to you what changes they would like to have in the products that you're offering. At the same time, your competitors' customers might also be talking to them. And they might be doing all of this on social media platforms. For example, if I am a consumer of a telecom giant and I have a problem with network in my particular location, I might have called the customer care 10 times, but eventually at some point of time, I'll go to the Facebook page or to the Twitter handle and write down my complaint. So this becomes market intelligence that anybody can use. And there are some very effective and potent tools which can be used to gather all this market intelligence in one place. We generally call this online listening tools, social media listening tools. There are free tools and there are very potent tools, but not very costly tools. I wouldn't say MSMEs would require those costly tools, but some tools which are cost effective for MSMEs, if you are able to implement them, you might be able to understand what your customers are talking to you, what your competitors' customers are talking to them, and what the industry in general is talking. Because at the end of the day, what these tools do is they try to capture keywords. So if you have specific keywords on which you are trying to search across, say, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and all the other social media domains, you might be able to gather information in one place. And any big piece of information generally is spoken by a large number of people. So this is generally something that becomes trending, but it might not be in the top 20 trends on Twitter immediately. But a tool might be able to capture this trend and be able to showcase it to you in one small platform, where you can look at it and understand that this is what the industry is talking about. This is what my customers are talking about to my competitor, which they are unhappy about. And that could be a way by which I can offer that value to this particular customer. This is a need in the market, or this is what my competitor has just done in the marketplace for which my customers are extremely energetic and happy about. So this becomes a place where I need to build those capabilities very soon. So these might be some things that we can do in order to be able to listen to the market. It is essentially what we used to do traditionally also. So if you remember back in the days in the 80s and early 90s, etc., and for my colleagues in the MSME sector who might have been working at this time, you would realize you would have people go into the dump yards of your competitors to see if official documents can be collected, which are discarded without having been shredded properly. So this is why a lot of companies have a habit of shredding official documents, because you don't want competitors to have access to these documents even from the dump yard where they have been discarded, right? So in a similar fashion, if you look at the analogy today, there is a lot of stray communication that is thrown out on social media domains here and there, many a times by accident, many a times because consumers are talking, etc. And today everybody is talking on digital platforms. If you have the capability to be able to sit in front of a computer screen and listen to everything in one place, you effectively have cracked all marketing insights in one place without having much difficulty. And once you know that this is something that is interesting, you can delve deeper and you can start listening more into it. Apart from this, of course, there are a lot of industry events, webinars like these, not just with educational content, but also with regard to, say, industry-wide content and things like that can be a good source of information for multiple MSMEs.
Yes, Professor, that's a really interesting one. Often, social media or hearing everything from the place that we are sitting acts as a weapon for us, actually, to get about the competitors, to know more about what is happening in and outside the world. Yes, in the world with the cutting edge technologies, we of course have this advantage of leveraging everything. And Professor, when it is coming to the marketing and customer acquisition, it has been changing a lot over a decade, especially in the pre-COVID and COVID market scenarios. So, how exactly it is changing over the decade, and what different digital marketing strategies are essential in this changing market scenarios? So,
right.
Yeah.
So customer acquisition essentially is when you want to acquire a new customer to the firm. It might not be repeat business that you're doing. So this customer is at some level a stranger to you and might be a stranger to everybody in the marketplace in the sense of people who are offering that value as well. So there are some habits that customers have which we need to understand. And this is again industry to industry specific. Even if customers are not brand loyal, that means that they are not loyal to one particular brand for a particular category of products. For example, for pens, I don't have a loyal brand. But I generally have a decision-making habit that I'll follow for each category. For example, if I want a pen, I might not go extensively doing a lot of research, etc. I'll just go to the nearby store and pick up a pen. Right. But when it comes to a mobile phone, when it comes to a tablet, when it comes to a lot of products which are very specific, customers have peculiar habits. And first thing that we need to do in order to have a very strong customer acquisition program in place is to understand these habits of consumers. Who are our consumers is the first stage, which of course every company knows because they will be doing business with a pattern of customers. The second is when you need to understand how is that the customer makes that decision. What has changed in the last decade? And I'll talk about COVID separately, but what has changed systematically over the last decade is that consumers are much more aware of what they want even before they come into the retail space or even before they come into the interaction with the vendor in the B2B domain. Consumers get a lot of information with regard to what products exist in the market, what services exist in the market, who are the key players in the market who have the capability, and they do a lot of research before even coming to the retail space or before even establishing contact with the company. So that is one thing that we have to keep in mind. And how do consumers make such decisions, or how do consumers learn so much? They generally use digital platforms to learn about a lot of these things. So traditionally, we used to talk about something called moments of truth. Moments of truth essentially is when consumers actually make certain preferences in their mind, either positive preferences, which is in favor of a product or service, or negative preferences, which is kind of deciding that I don't want this product or service, right? So generally, we used to talk about 3 moments of truth. Let me not go into all of them now. But in the new domain in the last decade, we have a new term which is called the 0th moment of truth. 0th moment of truth is when the consumer searches for a product online and first interacts with the product either in the e-commerce platform or on the search engine with regard to a very well optimized search link or the website or any information in the online domain. This is where the customer starts learning about the product or service. And roughly in the B2C domain, 80% plus is the portion of consumers who end up going to a search engine to try to understand what offerings are there in the market. For example, you might be technically very savvy. You might know everything about mobile phones, you might know everything about tablets, and you know everything about that microchip ecosystem, etc., etc. But even then, when suddenly one day your mobile phone falls down and breaks, the first thing you do is to go to either Google or go to Amazon or go to Flipkart or go to YouTube, any of these search engines, and start looking for what is the right product to buy. So in this particular scenario, consumers use search engines very effectively, and marketers need to be on search engines because you are able to get hold of the consumer very soon, very quickly. Now, once you grab the consumer's attention, then you need to gradually nurture the consumer to the end sale. And that stage and each of these stages might require deeper attention. For example, in some categories, consumers can just be shown product information and consumers can decide to buy which product. For some categories, greater intervention is required. For example, if you take a category like insurance, it is very difficult for you to actually get consumers to understand the entire product and convince them to buy the product in one go. So what do? You get consumers to understand the product in some extent and then get hold of their personal details like their mobile number, their email address or WhatsApp details, etc. And then establish a one-to-one contact with the customer and try to sell the product to the customer, similar to what aggregators like Policy Bazaar do. You go to their platform, they ask you for your name, mobile number, email address, etc. And then a sales representative calls out to you and talks to you, etc. So that could be a way by which, one, you understand the decision-making journey of a consumer, and then think about what digital tools can be put in place to acquire customers well. Apart from this, there are some standard practices. For example, you can use emails and SMSs to get a lot of sales promotion activities done for consumers so that they can buy it effectively. In case you are a B2B firm, try to establish contact with the customers or customer representatives in the form of employees of a customer organization, and try to make sure that you are constantly letting them know what new capabilities you have. So this is where white papers and case studies and webinars and a lot of events are done online, so that your clients or potential clients can be told as to what capabilities you are having, so that as and when they have a requirement, you are in the top of their mind, so that that RFP will come to you, you are included in the tendering process and things like that. And if you have a very strong relationship, you might even be able to get them to have those requirements specified in such a manner that it is something that you can offer effectively. You might be able to sell that value much effectively. So these are some of the ways by which you can think about acquiring customers.
Right, Professor. So, acquiring customers, especially in this changing market scenarios, one has to play according to the advantages that they actually possess within their resources, Professor. So, Professor, we have a question that is coming from one of our audience, Mr. Tinku Gupta. So, what is the best option for a small enterprise to begin with a low budget or no budget, especially in the services sectors like education and healthcare management or consulting services? So,
right. So, Mr. Gupta, what I would suggest is, if you have very low budgets or no budgets, that doesn't restrict you to have a digital marketing or social media presence. So that is one beautiful thing about digital and social media marketing. So my recommendation to you would be to start off with, have some kind of digital assets in place. When I say digital assets in place, it basically means have a website, have some kind of social media presence which represents the organization, not you individually as the entrepreneur. So this is where you can have a presence in the social media domain for the XYZ firm, either it be edtech or it be healthcare, etc. And try to see that this domain is created in a very professional manner. So don't just put in the name of the company and leave that Facebook page like that. You might have a lot of content which already exists in the organization. The content can be maybe previous lectures that you have provided or previous batches of students that you have trained. I don't know which specific education domain you represent, but you might have a lot of pictures, a lot of videos, a lot of things that can build credible expertise for you as a company. So the first recommendation would be to start focusing on creating these digital assets. Once you have these digital assets, the second objective is to get a critical mass of people on these platforms. When I say critical mass of people, it could be the students that you cater to, it could be employees of the organization itself, it could be patients and healthcare providers who are part of the healthcare management consulting service that you have dealt with. So get a critical mass of people to now be on this platform, because when you have a critical mass of people, the network effects can start building. For example, if you happen to have, say, 5,000 students on your social media platform, let's say Facebook, and you put out a piece of content that you're starting a new batch. I'm making a very rough assumption. Let's assume that you are providing training for, say, civil services exams. And if you put out content saying that I have now a new batch that is being launched, maybe there are 10 or 15 of these people who are on this platform who have somebody in their known networks who are looking for a good, credible, reliable partner. And hence that information can be shared by these people, and that will get you much more students to come and enroll. If you are in a pure consulting domain, even then it becomes a very capable tool to use. For example, if you are on a platform like LinkedIn and you are in an edtech or a healthcare consulting service, you might be consulting other entrepreneurs or other companies, small hospitals, clinics, doctors, who might now be either providing healthcare services or might be thinking about providing edtech or education services for their end consumers who might be patients or students, etc. So even in this particular domain, you need to have a credible presence where people, without having to establish a contact with you and you going to them and talking to them, you might be able to showcase what you are, what you have done in the past, and what your capabilities are. So like you going to the McKinsey website and seeing that, oh, McKinsey is doing so much great jobs and so much great work because they have professionally put down everything with respect to the capabilities, with respect to the geographies, with respect to the partners, with respect to the profile of the partners, with respect to the previous work that they have done across industries. You might also be able to showcase in a limited fashion, not like McKinsey, but at least in a limited fashion, whatever are the things that you have done in the past. And this, believe me, has a lot of traction because it leads to a lot of credible presence in the digital domain. And this credible presence will get you what is known as inbound marketing, where people will now start approaching you if you start doing it in a systematic manner. And if you are in a B2B domain, try to have some content posted in a systematic fashion. Maybe once in a week, you can write a note about the industry, or you can share content which is relevant to the industry, which is curated for the audience so that engagement levels are maintained. It cannot be done by the switch of a button. Like, no businesses are established overnight. Even social media and digital presence might require focused attention, but it can be done effectively. There are a lot of companies all over India who have established very great digital presence and social media presence and excelled in doing all of these things. So my suggestion would be to first of all focus on creating these digital assets. Secondly, get hold of people to come onto these platforms and have a critical mass of people. And thirdly, start focusing on generating content which these people might be interested in, and they engage with it effectively. Once you do these three things, you will see that the returns are now starting to come. And once you get confident that yes, these platforms are going to give me returns, then you can think about all the other paid means of advertising and other things.
Well, thanks, Professor. So I hope Mr. Gupta and for organization, could strategy, which help you in becoming a successful one. So, Professor, would you, as we are in time, would you like to share your final remarks for all our MSME audience?
Right. So my final remark for MSMEs is that don't be worried about what would happen in the digital domain. Don't be worried about this being a platform which is alien to you. Don't be worried about what big firms are doing on this platform. The best way to complete any job is to start it. Right. Unless you start it, you are nowhere close to completion. So please get onto the digital platform. Please try to make sure that you have a certain set of digital assets that you have created. There are a lot of tools that are available today. For example, you can use a marketplace like Amazon, which has millions and millions of customers and which provides you an access to a wide marketplace. And MSMEs, specifically MSMEs, should use this marketplace. So recently I was talking to a set of people who were predominantly into traditional industries, artisans. And for them, the online marketplace gives them a huge potential, because at the end of the day, they don't have the resources to have one e-commerce platform of their own. Two, they don't have the advertising revenues, advertising budgets to get Amazon like traffic to come to the platform. But in an established platform like Amazon, you can go and create a place for yourself, and you can make goods and services available to all across the country. This is a very beautiful opportunity that we have today. And I would request all MSMEs in the B2C domain who are not yet on e-commerce platforms to definitely venture into this. In the B2B domain as well, there are platforms and capabilities that can be built in. So think about what are the places where your potential customers are going to do business. Be present on all of these platforms. In case you are an MSME who does a lot of interaction and a lot of business with government entities, so please understand that even today you have e-procurement platforms and online tender platforms where you get hold of businesses and opportunities that are coming from government departments in one digital domain. So this can be a place where you can see what kind of opportunities exist. You can pitch for all of them. You can submit your tenders and proposals on all of these domains, and gradually try to make sure that you are getting accustomed to this platform, because this is the future. This is where most transactions are going to happen. This is where most consumers will comfortably be in future. So please use these platforms. And of course, we are all very happy to help you in case you have any problem. You can visit the I Am Indore website. My email address, phone number, etc. is there. So please reach out to me in case you feel that I can be of any help to you. And we keep providing a lot of content in this format, which is of course going to be of help to MSMEs. So please look at all that content. YouTube is a big repository of content for anything that you want to do, maybe with regard to social media or with regard to search engines. There are step-by-step how-to videos of how to do all of these things on YouTube. All of them is going to give you confidence, better know-how, and the ability to start your digital journey. So for people who haven't yet ventured into all of this, please take that step today itself. It's a very easy and a very effective means by which you can grow your business. I wish you all good health and happiness. I wish you all success in business as well. COVID, unfortunately, has created a lot of dent in how we used to operate. But then it is only when we have challenges that we think about how to transform and how to utilize new opportunities or how to build new opportunities. So let's all take this digital domain and the discussion we had around digital media and digital marketing as a potential opportunity that we have, because we see that consumers have very easily and rapidly moved from the traditional format of consumption to a digital format of consumption, maybe with BigBasket or maybe the JioMart app or the Tata Super app that has been just proposed. It is all directing towards the fact that consumers have taken this digital plunge. So as MSMEs, let's get into this domain and let's reap the benefits out of this. So that is my final advice.
Thank you so much, Mr. Subin Sudhir sir, for sharing all your knowledge with us. It was an engaging session, and I hope all our participants got a fair idea of how they need to strategize their digital marketing activities. Thank you so much.